So welcome everybody to this pre-event podcast ahead of the TinTech London Market event on the 3rd of February. I'm delighted to be joined by Jamie McDonald, who's the lead of London Market at Guidewire, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the trends, the issues, and some of the themes that we'll be covering ahead of the conference. So delighted you can make it, Jamie. Hello.
Yeah, delighted to be here. Looking forward to the event in February.
Great. So I was going to start off by asking you, I guess more generally, as we look across the market and some of the changes that you see at the moment, especially given the technology shifts and developments that we're seeing taking place, not only in insurance but across society. Where do you see the drivers for change? Where do you see kind of the opportunities, but also the threats?
So last year I talked about, the London market in terms of its global market relevance and how really we need to stay ahead of the game and kind of create what is the defensible moat of the London market. And I think really there's been, I think that was quite well received. It was, I was quite nervous. I thought it was maybe quite a controversial point to be kind of making, but actually I think it was quite well received. And I think some of the trends that we're now seeing, kind of follow quite nicely from that. So obviously I think it's pretty much agreed now that the market cycle is softening for pretty much all lines of business. You had Rachel Turk from Lloyd's kind of coming out and talking about that in their recent address at Lloyd's for their quarterly results. I think we're seeing an increase in M&A activity. We're seeing that because ultimately a lot of primary insurers are seeing the opportunity to, kind of go into the same kind of markets. Continental Europe, for an example, is one. We're seeing a little bit of that business portfolio maybe shift away from Lloyd's and the bureau to more of the non-bureau and broader market. In terms of, I guess, experimentation with AI, I'd probably say the third trend really is that's been really where there's been some positives. So some people have really got some innovative ideas off the ground and really started to experiment. But I think we still run back into the same problems, which is ultimately experimentation is kind of pointless if you can't then scale it and unlock that efficiency and that value across the broader portfolio. So yeah, from that respect, I think it's a case of same challenges. We still need to kind of continue to move in the same direction. But ultimately, I think the market is now starting to accept that things like cloud adoption is definitely something which is going to help alleviate some of the challenges we face.
Talk there about kind of innovations kind of taking hold and starting to deliver ROI, whether those being quite small proof of concepts or perhaps being rolled out now across the organisation. Have you seen, you've got, obviously Guidewire, you've got a lot of customers. Where are you seeing those kind of proofs of concepts really making a difference? So
we think about it in the context of obviously the London market in particular. It's really famed having that kind of 40% administration expense ratio to for every kind of dollar of insurance premium that it ships. And so if I kind of think about it from an underwriting perspective and a claims perspective, we talk about intelligent insurance, and what we mean by that is where is the intellectual value add of your organisation? And so when we hear things like underwriters using 5 to 7 different systems just to do their job, spending hours doing rekeying, data cleansing from information they get from brokers and putting it into their systems. So we've announced in November in our global conference in the US that we're going to be stepping into a space that I think has been a challenge for a lot of insurers in the London market for a while, which is that pre-bind underwriting space. A lot of people have tried to solve that with Underwriter Workbench, Underwriter Desktop, etc. And so we're going to be launching Underwriting Center, which is effectively kind of focused on a number of areas in that pre-bind space, but predominantly submission ingestion, submission triage, pricing, rating, and then ultimately kind of quote and bind. And the reason that I think a lot of our customers are kind of asking us to step into that space is they've really hit a lot of challenges around some of the providers in that space or some of the experiments they've tried to get off the ground, not really understanding the downstream processes and how that pre-bind space ties into policy administration and finance and payments. On the claims side of the house, that's really where I think claims have been a bit behind, to be frank, in terms of where people's investments have been. The last 25 years have really been about digitizing that claim file, creating predictable workflows, and then automating them. The next 5 years and beyond, we think, is going to be what we refer to as the age of the agentic adjuster. And so what we mean by that is claims handlers having more of a portfolio view in the same way that portfolio underwriting has really started to take off. And so, you're really giving superpowers to those claims handlers in the form of AI agents or AI bots that are able to perform tasks across an entire portfolio rather than just claim by claim. So that might be raising insights around opportunities for things like salvage, things like subrogation, helping pick up insights around litigation and the sort of experts and outsourced suppliers that the insurer is working with. But really what that enables the adjusters or the claims department to do is really to drive better outcomes for their business and also their customers, rather than just kind of being in this constant cycle of spinning plates and firefighting.
Yeah. And a lot of this comes down to data quality, accessibility, and being able to have that vision of that portfolio. Mm-hmm. Do you think organizations are ready for that shift that you've just been describing, or is there some real fundamental work that needs to be done still at that level? Where do you think we are on that?
Yeah, and the London market is a bit of a paradox, right? Because the London market is ultimately the distribution channel for a digital product, but we go out of our way to trade it in a manual way. And so that kind of links to the data point so far as this should be relatively simple. But the fact we have data being put into PDFs, being into Excel spreadsheets, and then passed around from broker to underwriter, we create that challenge. Now, as I say, in that kind of pre-bind submission ingestion space, a lot of people have kind of spent a bit of time trying to solve that problem, and I think there's some really good work that has been done there. But it's then, okay, how do you scale that and add it into a tech stack which might have a data warehouse? How do you then start to be able to kind of bring to life things like predictive analytics, insights, etc.? So ultimately, yes, I do feel there's been kind of progress in that area, but I still think a lot of those kind of legacy systems, the inability for those systems to connect with each other, integrate via API, the London market, we've got used to workarounds. Blueprint 2 is ultimately, a challenge because of years and decades of layer upon layer of workaround. And so actually, if you step outside of EC3, APIs in terms of technology and how data moves around different industries, API is something that's kind of been in place for decades. So from that perspective, it's not a situation where we should be looking to build workarounds. We should just accept the challenge that we have, pull out some of those legacy systems, fix the foundations, and ultimately we can start to unlock some of the value here.
Yeah. So as we look forward towards the conference in a couple of months' time, what are you hoping that we're going to have as an outcome in perhaps the next 6 months? Where do you think leaders should be prioritizing their focus in order to be ready for this kind of new world as you've just described it?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be exploring that paradox that I described around the digital product in a little bit more detail and how we've managed to get into a situation where over the 300 years we've almost turned that into a very analog thing, or it's continued to be traded in a very analog way. But I really do want it to be positive because one thing we obviously we pride and we put proud of and we put a huge amount of value across is that human engagement or that human interaction. And I think sometimes we just we're not saying let's automate absolutely everything. If there's intellectual value that's being added at a stage with human interaction, then we should absolutely encourage that. But I think what I want to kind of do is lead with a positive kind of view, which is that ultimately the opportunity within insurance is far greater than maybe other industries because of the fact that we do have the ability to trade a product which is it's weightless, it's intangible, it has almost no cost to transfer it between parties. And so from that respect, we can make sure that every single human touch point adds intellectual value. And I talked last year about what is the moat that protects the London market. And I think I left that presentation saying that ultimately it is the human element, it is the human intellect and the knowledge and the expertise we have in this market. And so from that perspective, we can just focus the time and activity of those individuals on that value add piece. I think the London market's going to be in great shape for the future.
Yeah, and I agree because if I reflect back on the first wave of digital transformation 10 maybe 15 years ago. And there was quite a lot of people that were saying, actually, this type of technology change is not going to impact the London market. We're a special market. We're highly regulated. It's not, it doesn't work. That clearly isn't the case. And I'm not feeling in the conversations I'm having that same kind of resistance to change. In fact, it's almost reversed. It's almost an appetite to embrace these new technologies and tools because they can see real advantage in leverage them. So I'm really excited, not just about the conference, but the next few years of development.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, a lot of our customer base as well, have heritage in different parts of the world and the US, and maybe sometimes the fact that we're a wholesale market, I can get quite frustrated because the margins are quite thin, obviously, in a wholesale market. And so from that perspective, for me, that just adds more of an argument as to why we need to eradicate some of these inefficiencies.
Great. Jamie, thanks very much. Great to see you again. Look forward to seeing you at TINTET London Market.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.